Start drinking more.
That was per week. She thought you said per day.
No, I did not.
Yeah.
I was out when you said you could drink
She's
more.
tapping me. It's like
You
3 to
drink-
5 drinks per week, and I'm
you
like,
can drink red
didn't
wine
say
with
per
me.
day.
Yeah. And a wine glass that has half a liter of wine in it, it's not necessarily a standard drink.
Babe, it's not a Molly pour.
It's not a Molly pour.
Getting into the thyroid, there's several different markers here. We have some good and some bad. Maybe just the down and dirty, put it together rather than talking about each individual test separately. Let's just combine it into the entire thyroid. A lot of people, more women, are going to complain, I have an underactive thyroid, that's why I'm overweight. So let's see what's going on with her thyroid.
Yeah, so all in all, your thyroid function is pretty decent. Your reverse T3 was quite high. So T4 is kind of the inactive thyroid hormone. It's not metabolized as fast. It either converts into T3 or reverse T3. T3 is active, binds to receptors, etc. Reverse T3 is inactive, but it still causes negative feedback inhibition. So if your reverse T3 is high, there can be several different causes. Sometimes it is inflammation. Sometimes it's stress. Your cortisol is high. That can play a part in it as well. If you're in a caloric deficit, that can play a part. And if you're lacking thyroid cofactors, then that can play a part as well. So usually we recommend a strategy that optimizes micronutrients through either diet or supplementation, and then recheck.
Okay.
Any questions about that one?
Well, I was just looking at these micronutrients, like given as samples.
So like, in other words,
oysters. I
a
like
balanced
oysters.
diet. Like really, if you have a balanced diet, you're going to get the micronutrients that you need. Some people will skip certain food groups. Well, could it be being whatever kind of vegetarian you are? Could that be an impact?
Pescatarian?
It could, because you eat plenty of things from the ocean, including fish, I would think that is less of a concern.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
if you were a true vegan, then perhaps I'd be more concerned.
All right. So overall, her thyroid's not bad. She doesn't need to go to the doctor and get Synthroid or something like that. It's pretty good.
Interestingly, if you take Synthroid, it can precipitously increase your reverse T3. So when you talk to a functional medicine doctor or integrative medicine doc, occasionally a high reverse T3 is more of a reason to incorporate T3 or natural desiccated thyroid, because theoretically that'll help decrease your reverse T3 and not try to force your T4 at high levels so that your reverse T3 goes up extremely high to have a mid-normal T4, or sorry, T3.
That makes
All right.
sense.
And this, she was really interested in this, the heart health, super important, the most important muscle. So let us see, how is she making out with her heart when we can go into the cholesterols and so on. Let's take it away.
Yeah, not too bad considering you presumably have, admittedly have a pretty normal North American diet. So your HDL particle is just a number of the actual particles, and it's okay. It could be slightly better. People with higher estrogen, whether they're females or just males with high estrogen, endogenously or exogenously, that is one thing that helps increase your HDL particles. Your LDLP, we really like that under 1,000. The goal of 500 is almost an unattainable goal depending on your genetics, but your LDLP is okay. Your small LDLP, that can be related to your triglyceride intake. So that was 588, and our goal is usually under 527. All these particles in general, these indicate insulin resistance from lipids. So even people that are on a very low carb diet can become insulin resistant and diabetic because of the lipids.
Is this a genetic thing? Because both my brother and my mom have had cholesterol issues where they had to go on a medication. I'm not positive which one it was. And then just for a temporary period of time, and now they're both off of it. But it freaked my brother out so much. He completely changed his diet. He lost weight. He now rides his bike. He's a cyclist like Greg. And he's been fine ever since.
Yeah, lipids are about 80% genetics, 80% diet, and 80% exercise and lifestyle.
Okay.
So if you change one of those things, so if you change your genetics using CRISPR or whatever else we're going to do in the future,
yeah,
you probably only improve them by about 20%. But if you change both your diet and lifestyle, you can improve them by about 40%. That's a rule of thumb that I use. So Doctors and, lipidologists and such spend a lot of time debating if it's, 50% genetics, 50% lifestyle, or 70-30. But I just think that it's, you can't really put it in there. Obviously 80, and 80 adds up to more than 100%, but each of those factors is a very strong predisposition.
Okay.
Okay, so is there anything else to go over in this? I saw HSCRP. That one was a bit off. The rest seem to be green.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about your CRP and your LP little a, or your lipoprotein A, a bit. So a CRP of under 1, especially a CRP of under 0.5, indicates a low level of inflammation and a low chance of cardiovascular disease. So in general, think of inflammation and things like insulin resistance as glue. So if you have lots of glue, but you don't have many blocks, then you're probably not going to have a lot of plaque. If you have lots of blocks, but no glue, you're probably not going to have a lot of plaque. So people who are in the camp that say cholesterol and lipids don't matter, which is obviously a bit of hyperbole because cholesterol is what makes up plaque in the heart. It's because if you don't have the glue that causes it to stick, and of course this is an analogy in layman's terms, you're not going to build up a lot of plaque. So it's true, your cholesterol or your bad cholesterol or total could be 300 or 400. If you have a very low CRP, then you're going to have much less atherosclerosis or buildup of plaque. So general inflammation can cause your CRP to be high. Crohn's disease, if you're having a flare, your CRP would probably be 30 or 40, extremely high. So all things considered, 1.3 is
not too bad.
Pretty good for the hand that you've been dealt. Lipoprotein A is a particularly sticky lipid particle. A lot of it's genetic, tends to be transmitted on chromosome 6, but it's one that's not checked very often. The reason why it's not checked often is when we check something, we like there to be an intervention that really helps. Interestingly, testosterone and estrogen and niacin, which is vitamin B3, they can all help decrease lipoprotein little a. But if you take a medicine like a statin, then it can actually increase it. So it's kind of a particle of the future. Some of the new lipid medicines like Praluent or Repatha or PCSK9 inhibitors, they do marginally help decrease lipoprotein little a. So in the future, when those are available to the general population or affordable to the general population, those will probably be used in cases when people are at risk of cardiovascular disease and they have high lipoprotein A and high bad cholesterol.
And this might be off topic, but she was told she should supplement vitamin B12 just from friends and so on. Does that make any sense? Could that benefit her in any way in these things because of her being vegetarian and whatnot? Is that something she should start injecting?
Yeah, absolutely. So vitamin B12 is a very special vitamin. So you think of your fat solubles, D, A, K, and E, cake with a D. Those are the ones that are absorbed with fat, and they're also stored in the liver. Your water solubles, B vitamins, vitamin C, etc., they're not able to be built up in high levels, but vitamin B12 is a little bit of an exception because the liver can store vitamin B12 almost like a fat soluble vitamin. So you can stockpile it, if you will, more than most water soluble vitamins. It's also absorbed very uniquely in the gut. So when you digest your food, if you have vitamin B12 with it, the stomach will release a factor known as intrinsic factor, which binds vitamin B12 in the stomach, but it's not absorbed all the way. It's mostly absorbed in the terminal ileum. Interestingly, Crohn's disease mostly affects the terminal ileum. So many people with Crohn's, especially if you had your terminal ileum out, it's very difficult to absorb vitamin B12 without a terminal ileum, or if you have an inflamed terminal ileum. So a lot of people
you had removed.
B12
somewhere
where you got cut
somewhere
out.
Close to there. I don't know if it was exactly that, but in like the ileum, that's where my disease, like close to there.
And it was close to 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Like getting on that.
Yeah, it was 22 or 23, and I'll be 40.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, B12 supplementation would be a great idea. And you're veggie pescatarian, so you don't eat a lot of meat, which might have good sources of B12 as well. But yeah, especially if you don't have part of your ileum, that could definitely be something to consider. When you're absorbing B12, there's something methylmalonic acid or MMA that tells you how well you're converting it to its active form. So usually we just have people take cyanocobalamin, which is the active form of B12, either intranasally, which kind of gives you a nootropic effect since it's absorbed and skips the blood-brain barrier, or we have people take it buccally, so it can dissolve almost like a troche, dissolves in the mucosa of your mouth, or obviously you can inject it as well. But usually the nasocobalamin or the mucosally dissolving cyanocobalamin are more popular.
Yeah, definitely.
And we may as well very quickly go over coagulation. Some of these things are probably less exciting for the people like watching at home, but like may as well quickly talk about it.
Yeah, so no concerns with your coagulation profile. Things like that are very boring until someone, yourself or a loved one, has a blood clot or has a coagulation problem.
And metabolics, people like that. What can we learn from her on this one?
Your fasting glucose is quite good. I don't know if you were able to fast the whole time. I know that you got labs a little later, which was kind of difficult.
Yep. No, I fasted.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, awesome fasting glucose. Your A1C was 5.5. So usually people that have diets high in glycosylated end products, even if they're the same level of carbs or they're the same glycemic load, so you can look at the glycemic index for each food, which might be different. So, 60 grams of dextrose is going to have a different glycemic index than 60 grams of fructose, I guess your favorite sugar. So
all sugar is my favorite sugar.
Yeah.
Candy's my favorite.
Sugar and carbs. Candy's my favorite.
Yeah. There is a diet that's called low glycosylated end products. And A1C is just one of the glycosylated end products. So that's usually a diet that's low in chips, crackers, and cookies. Think of anything that crunches, that's good. It's probably ending up with lots of glycosylated end products.
Oh, that's funny.
All right, into blood studies?
Complete blood count.
Yeah.
So what is that saying?
So your blood studies were very reassuring. Basically, it looks to see how your hematology profile is functioning. We're looking for anemia, deficiencies, dehydration, hypoxia. If you have high red blood cells, it can be a sign of that. If you have low red blood cells, it can be a sign that you're not making enough. Sometimes people with very low androgen levels have lower erythropoietin. Also, exercise and living at altitude can increase your erythropoietin. One thing that your COCP regimen has been protective of is anemia. So obviously a lot of women struggle with anemia because of their menstrual periods. So fortunately it is having a positive effect. Yes. Whenever I talk negatively or positively about something, it's especially when it's publicly, it's important to point out whenever something that you're currently doing is having the positive effect, because it can seem like I'm just absolutely trashing.
Yeah. What have I done? This is so bad. Yes.
Yeah. So that is a benefit. The next part of that is your DNA and pheno age. So this is using a lot of different markers, and it's an estimate of how old your DNA is. As the DNA ages, its telomeres can shorten. Lots of people are trying to figure out how to lengthen telomeres, but
exactly.
It's very difficult to do. And yours came out at 40 years old.
So pretty much right on where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And kidney function, how's she making out?
Your kidney function is excellent. So no concern with our, creatinine, GFR. As you age, normally, just statistically, your calculated filtration rate will decline slowly. Yours is 83. So you're nowhere near the 60, which is where we start to watch a little bit closer. Some people that are exercising that had a really hardcore workout, going harder than last time, maybe that would bump their creatinine up a little bit from muscle protein breakdown. And then if people on a creatine supplement, sometimes that can falsely elevated it. So often we recommend a cystatin C, which is just another methodology to assess the filtration rate of the kidney.
And liver functions surprisingly well, despite all the wine.
Yeah, so liver function,
blue check or green check.
Doing quite well.
I see green.
Yeah, perhaps if that's a bit of red wine, then it'll have things like resveratrol, which is a potent antioxidant in it that might help your CRP to some degree. You can.
Don't be using.
It is possible to take that.
I'm sure it's not 2 bottles that you need for this antioxidant.
Babe, I don't drink 2 bottles.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, Greg, don't listen, but Allie, you can also take that in a supplement without the alcohol as well. But
no,
yeah.
It's much better to take it with the alcohol.
With the empty calories.
Yeah. There's a good anxiolytic effect from it. Alcohol is an interesting subject because the Cardiologist Society in the US recommends different amounts for men and women. And the reason why they recommend slightly more for men, other than men can tend to metabolize it a little bit better, is because it can be protective against cardiovascular disease and plaque buildup in very low quantities. So, maybe 3 to 5 drinks a week for men, maybe 3 drinks a week for women. So
start drinking
that was per week. She thought you said per day.
No, I did not.
Yeah.
I was out when you said you could drink
She's
more.
tapping me. It's like 3 to 5 drinks per week, and I'm like,
drink red
didn't
wine
say
with
per
me.
day.
Yeah. And a wine glass that has half a liter of wine in it's not necessarily a standard drink.
Babe, it's not a Molly pour.
It's not a Molly pour.
It doesn't count.
Darn it.
No. And
But,
changing into cancer screening, that looks good.
Yeah, cancer screening, no concerns. If you are, the cancer screening that we don't do, I should say, is we talked about colonoscopies, FIT tests, Cologuard, colon cancer screening in general. It looks like 45 is the magic age to start for people who don't have any risk factors, familial risk factors. As far as breast cancer screening, my recommendation is starting at 40 years of age for mammogram for people without risk factors.
All right, next month. And vitamin status.
Yeah, vitamin status, for being in good old cold northern Canada, pretty high latitude, it's good. Current is 60. I don't know if you take vitamin D, but a lot of people have vitamin D issues.
I don't take anything. I'm horrible.
She drinks wine. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that she's consistent with.
I'm so bad. Like I really do need to get on some sort of a regimen of taking, supplementing and doing what I need to do. I just, it's busy around here. So I literally throw on clothes, feed animals, and then I'm out the door. So yeah. I'm really bad.
One thing that people can keep in mind that have had part of their colon or digestive tract taken out is they can take vitamins that are intended for people that have had bariatric surgery because they might have malabsorption.
Yeah, so different parts absorb certain things. So if you have a section out, thankfully I only had 1.5 feet out, so it didn't affect anything per what my GI had told me. So I didn't have to change anything, thankfully.
Yeah, that's good. Your vitamin B12 was actually surprisingly decent. It was 439. Ideally or optimally, it would be higher than that. We don't necessarily know how we're converting it. So, we could always test an MMA to see if there's, an impending deficiency or a methylmalonic acid. So perhaps next labs will add that in. Your folate's pretty good. Your iron level is good. That's just the iron in your bloodstream, not necessarily in the bones. Your ferritin is a marker of iron in the bones. If your CRP or other acute phase reactants are slightly elevated, then your ferritin can be falsely elevated. So it is possible that your ferritin would be your true, idea of how much iron's in your bones as a storage form. It could be a little bit lower than 137, but all in all, I give you an A for your vitamin profile.
Good. So my body's functioning relatively well considering what I do to it.
Keyword considering. Not optimal.
Not optimal, but considering my age and everything else that I do to it.
Imagine if you lifted weights.
I know.
Did cardio and ate healthy.
I know.
3
Yeah,
hours.
and I tell everyone this as well, and I mentioned it last time I came on to chat about labs, is the most powerful thing that we can prescribe is diet and exercise and lifestyle changes, much more powerful than any pharmaceutical or, any
supplements or anything. Yeah, agreed.
Yep.
And transitioning into, I think pituitary function's the next thing on the list here. LH, FSH?
I believe the last markers that are up is your pituitary function. Yeah, so this is a little bit confusing because you essentially are stuck in a senescence phase of like the normal menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
So usually these are more for like a luteal phase marker. Since you're stuck in purgatory, I guess.
Yeah.
For better or for worse.
Yeah.
I don't think we can really have a good idea of what it wants to be. Your LH, or luteinizing hormone, was 1.7. So luteinizing hormone can help with progesterone secretion, and then it also stimulates the theca cells, which are cells that secrete testosterone in the ovaries. So, you know, you're probably very low on LH a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for all this information. I think we'll have to talk about things and some of the recommendations, see what we might want to implement. Go see our own doctors here in Canada and see what they say. Use some of this information, and you know, it's certainly going to help us make changes in our own diets, lifestyle, hopefully. And for anyone out there, I highly recommend that you do this. How was it listening to this guy and learning from this? What did you think?
So I was more nervous when I first looked at it without having the explanation. So, you know, you seem to know, compared to, you know, what my family doctor would have even tested for, like yours is much more thorough. And, you know, I've got a good plan as to what I need to do to correct these things. So I was nervous to do it, and I was nervous when I got it back, but I feel much better now with explanations of why things look the way they do.
And I think even if it comes out bad, wouldn't you rather know? Knowledge is power. If it came back and said, well, you really should do this, then you're like, well, I'll do that. And if it comes back all good, then you're like, well, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, keep drinking my wine. Yeah,
exactly. I'm that kind of person who doesn't like to go to the doctor. So I'll just like leave, unless I'm like dying. I just am like, I'm fine. I'm like, I'm living my life. I'm good. But it is good to know if things need to be changed, an action plan to change those things. You don't want to wait till it's too late. So.
Yeah. That's how most people are as well. So if it makes you feel any better, when we do this excellent lab workup, 99% of people have at least a couple markers that are off. And when you get them back, you know, even if you're a doctor or whatever, when you see something that's off, it's very concerning.
Yeah.
So when it's your own health, you look at it completely differently. Almost like if you see a car broken down on the road, it's not super concerning, but then when it happens to your car, that's really,
it's a big deal.
So, I don't like going to the mechanic, but I still try to go in and get, you know, my checkups and get my oil changed, and they hook it up to the magic computer, and it
just to see if anything's going on.
Yeah. And it's the exact same way for humans as well. So if you really don't like going to the doctor, going in regularly and getting true preventative medicine, kind of getting your diagnostic report with the magic computer that's, you know, labs is more important.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I think we'll leave a pinned comment or pin something where they can like click the link and figure out how to go to like the America Health, make it easier for people. So if you want to get your labs done, you see what you get, and you know, and you've seen our experiences, and so
you get a plan.
Do it on your own. Go for it. I mean, why take your health for granted?
Yep. And if it's something that you choose to do, it is right now only for people in the United States that live in the U.S. We are adding Canada hopefully very soon. In addition, there is a form that you'll fill out that does have your health history, and it has the medications you're on, your diagnoses, et cetera. That way we can order very targeted labs.
Yeah, perfect. So 42% of my audience is from the US, and it's only about 6 or 7% that are from Canada. So majority of people are probably watching this from the US. And if you're from Canada, it might come in someday, hopefully soon. And we're kind of like, I call us like guinea pigs to see if it can be worked out. And obviously it can. So perhaps in the future, it's something you can get if you're in Canada.
Absolutely.
You can go right over to Merrick Health, and then you can scroll through and see what you're interested in. I mean, if you're not interested, that's totally cool. But if you do, if you want to get this stuff, go try it, give it a try. Highly recommended from both me and Alan.
Yeah, you want to know, guys. You don't want to stay in the dark just in case.
Exactly. So until next time, we are out.